Hey guys, tonight we set sail into the vast, endless blue of the Pacific Ocean, a watery expanse so immense it makes you feel like a tiny speck adrift in the cosmos. Imagine islands scattered like gems across this massive sea, each one hundreds, sometimes thousands of miles apart. You probably won't survive this journey without feeling dizzy from the sheer scale. No GPS, no compasses, just the stars' waves, and the knowledge passed down through generations. Navigating this immense ocean was no small feat. It was an art, a science, and a way of life for the ancient Polynesians. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Also, drop your location and local time in the comments. I love hearing where in the world you're joining from. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum. And let's ease into tonight's journey together. You stand on the deck of a double-hulled canoe, feeling the gentle sway of the ocean beneath your feet. The night sky above is alive with stars, brilliant points of light arranged in patterns that tell stories, mark seasons, and guide your way. Here's your mainstream historical fact. The Polynesians were master navigators, voyaging across an area covering millions of square miles long before European explorers dreamed of ocean crossings. Their voyages reached the far corners of the Pacific, from Hawaii to Easter Island to New Zealand. You breathe in salty air as the canoe cuts through swells, your eyes fixed on the night sky. But this isn't just stargazing, it's reading a living map, a celestial compass. Here's your quirky tidbit. Polynesian navigators didn't rely on instruments like compasses or sextants. Instead, they memorized star paths, ocean swells, bird flight patterns, and cloud reflections to keep their way across vast, open water. Historians still argue whether Polynesian navigation was purely instinctive, passed orally through generations, or if there was some form of proto-scientific method behind the knowledge. Some even debate whether such long voyages were accidental or deliberate. Spoiler, the evidence strongly favors the latter. You feel the hum of the canoe and the night breeze mingle as the stars trace their eternal arcs overhead, guiding the way on a journey that combines courage, knowledge, and a deep bond with nature itself. Next, you'll learn how these ancient navigators used the stars as their ultimate guides, mastering an ocean that could swallow entire fleets without a trace. You lift your gaze skyward, where constellations glimmer like stitched silver on a vast dark canvas. For the Polynesians, these stars weren't just decoration. They were their roadmap across the open ocean, their silent guides through endless nights. Here's your mainstream historical fact. Polynesian navigators memorized the rising and setting points of dozens of stars and constellations, using their angles on the horizon to maintain course even when no land was in sight. You feel the cool night air brush your skin as you imagine the navigator's eyes scanning the sky, tracking star paths like clockwork. They knew which stars appeared at what times and where they dipped below the horizon, adjusting their bearings accordingly. Here's your quirky tidbit. Some navigators used star houses, mental segments of the sky, divided into compass points to keep track of their direction. It's like having an invisible cosmic compass that only the initiated could read. Historians still argue about how much formalized teaching existed versus oral tradition and apprenticeship. Was this celestial knowledge encoded in elaborate mental maps, or passed down as stories and songs? The truth probably lies somewhere in between. You sense the skill and memory required a mental dance with the heavens, where a single misread star could mean drifting miles off course, lost at sea. But Polynesians trained from childhood, embedding the sky's rhythms deep into their consciousness. Here's where you feel the vastness of their achievement to read an ever-changing night sky and steer a fragile canoe across thousands of miles without instruments is nothing short of miraculous. You imagine the navigator's calm confidence, a blend of observation, intuition, and experience, guiding them through star-lit waters. Next, you'll explore the design of the ocean-going canoes that carried these voyagers safely across the waves. You stand aboard one of the sleek, double-hulled canoes, crafted by Polynesian hands vessels designed to conquer the vast Pacific, balancing agility with strength the hulls cut through the waves like blades carrying voyagers across the great blue unknown. Here's your mainstream historical fact. Polynesian double-hulled canoes, often measuring up to 60 feet long, were marvels of indigenous engineering capable of long ocean voyages with impressive stability and speed. You run your hand along the polished wood and woven lashings, marveling at how these vessels used natural materials like koa wood and coconut fiber to create flexible yet resilient structures. The design allowed them to ride swells with ease, even in fierce storms. Here's your quirky tidbit. Some canoes featured ama floats attached to the side hulls for extra balance, resembling tiny outriggers that prevented capsizing, an innovation still seen in modern outrigger canoes. Historians still argue whether the exact construction techniques varied widely across island groups or followed shared design principles passed down through generations. Some believe local adaptations made each canoe uniquely suited to its environment. You imagine the rhythm of paddles dipping into the ocean, the crew's chants harmonizing with the sound of wind and water, a symphony of skill and tradition keeping the canoe steady on its course. Here's where you appreciate the harmony between human ingenuity and natural materials, crafting vessels perfectly suited for the daunting task of open ocean travel without modern technology. You sense how the canoe wasn't just transportation, it was a lifeline, a home and a symbol of connection between islands and peoples scattered across the Pacific. Next, you'll meet the navigators themselves, keepers of ancient knowledge who memorized stars, winds, and waves to guide these oceanic journeys. You now meet the navigators revered as the masters of the sea and sky, those chosen few who carry generations of knowledge in their minds, guiding their canoes through endless blue horizons with nothing but nature as their compass. Here's your mainstream historical fact. Polynesian navigators underwent years of rigorous apprenticeship learning to read stars, ocean swells, bird behavior, and cloud formations to maintain course across vast distances. You watch an elder teacher pointing out constellations, tracing invisible lines in the sky, while young apprentices memorize star paths, wave patterns, and seasonal changes, their minds absorbing this celestial library like sponges. Here's your quirky tidbit. Some navigators employed mental maps using star compasses divided into dozens of segments, each linked to specific islands or directions. An ancient GPS of sorts held entirely in the mind. Historians still argue how much of this knowledge was codified versus orally transmitted. Was there a structured system, or did each navigator develop a personal repertoire through experience? Probably a blend of both. You feel the weight of responsibility on these navigators' shoulders, their knowledge determining whether an entire crew reaches land or drifts endlessly at sea. Their training was as much about memorizing nature's signals as embodying calm patience and trust. Here's where you grasp how navigation was as much an art as a science, a dialogue between human and environment, built on centuries of observation and respect. You sense the quiet confidence and focus required as a navigator stands at the bow eyes, locked on the star's body, attuned to the subtle shifts of wind and wave. Next, you'll learn how the ocean itself speaks a language of swells and currents that helped confirm the navigator's course. You feel the ocean beneath the canoe, not just as water, but as a living, breathing entity sending constant signals in its waves and swells. These patterns, invisible to the untrained eye, spoke volumes to the Polynesian navigator. Here's your mainstream historical fact. Polynesian navigators used the motion and direction of ocean swells to maintain their course, interpreting the way waves refracted around islands, or combined to form telltale patterns indicating proximity to land. You watch as the canoe rocks gently on intersecting swells, the navigator's keen senses discerning subtle differences in wave direction and rhythm, nature's own compass aiding the star. Here's your quirky tidbit. Some navigators used wave piloting, a technique where they memorized the unique swell patterns of different ocean regions, allowing them to know their position even under a cloudy sky. Historians still argue how detailed and widespread this knowledge was, whether all Polynesian navigators mastered wave reading equally, or if it was specialized skill held by a few experts. You feel the rhythm of the ocean become a language, swells, shift currents, pulse, and the canoe responds, moving in harmony with these natural forces. The navigator listens with every sense, translating liquid signals into directions. Here's where you grasp how extraordinary it is to read an ever-changing, invisible map, relying on intuition honed by years of experience to confirm the path laid out by stars and birds. You sense the vastness of the ocean's embrace, its beauty and danger intertwined, as the canoe glides forward, guided by the dialogue between human skill and nature's patterns. Next, you'll see how living creatures like birds and fish offered additional clues to guide these epic voyages. You scan the horizon, watching for the telltale flight of seabirds, messengers from the islands themselves, their behavior clues in the great ocean puzzle. These creatures, small and swift, became invaluable guides for Polynesian navigators. Here's your mainstream historical fact. Polynesian navigators observed bird flight paths. Certain species only ventured so far from land during the day. So following their flight could lead voyagers safely to islands hidden beyond the horizon. You imagine the sharp eyes of the navigator spotting a frigate bird soaring high, its silhouette etched against the sun, signaling land just beyond the swell. This natural GPS was as reliable as any man-made instrument. Here's your quirky tidbit. Some navigators even memorized the calls of various bird species, interpreting their patterns to infer time of day and proximity to land, a multisensory wayfinding technique, blending sound and sight. Historians still argue how systematically this knowledge was applied. Was birdwatching a formal part of navigation training, or more an intuitive skill developed over voyages? Evidence suggests it was a crucial component, but practices likely varied across islands. You feel the interconnectedness of life and journey. How humans, birds, fish, and waves all played roles in the ancient navigation dance, a shared story of survival and exploration. Here's where you marvel at the subtlety of the system, where a wing beat or a distant cry might mean the difference between discovery and drifting lost. You imagine how this knowledge allowed Polynesians to venture confidently into the unknown, trusting the rhythms of nature as guides. Next, you'll uncover the mental maps created from island chains, the stepping stones that made the vast ocean a navigable highway. You picture the vast Pacific dotted with countless islands, each one a waypoint on an immense celestial highway. For Polynesian navigators, these islands were not just destinations, they were landmarks in a complex mental map spanning thousands of miles. Here's your mainstream historical fact. Polynesian navigators memorized the relative positions and distances between island chains, using these mental maps to plan voyages and maintain orientation across the open ocean. You sense how this map wasn't drawn on paper, but in memory stories and star paths, an intricate web of knowledge connecting places as far-flung as Hawaii, Easter Island, and New Zealand. Here's your quirky tidbit. Some navigators visualize these mental maps as a series of concentric circles or lines radiating from their home island, each linked to specific stars and ocean patterns, effectively creating a star compass tied to geography. Historians still argue about how fixed or flexible these mental maps were. Did navigators update them regularly or rely on ancestral knowledge passed down with little change? Most likely experience refined the maps continuously. You feel the power of these invisible routes, turning an endless ocean into a manageable network of stepping stones, each island a beacon for the next leg of the journey. Here's where you understand how this mental mapping, combined with star knowledge and natural signs, made Polynesian navigation one of history's greatest feats of exploration and human memory. You imagine the thrill of spotting a distant island, the relief and joy after days or weeks at sea, the culmination of careful planning and intimate knowledge of the ocean's geography. Next, you'll delve deeper into the celestial navigation tools and techniques that completed this extraordinary system. You tilt your head to the night sky once more, this time focusing on the celestial toolkit Polynesian navigators carried in their minds, not just stars, but the sun, moon, and horizon itself, all woven together to guide their way. Here's your mainstream historical fact. Polynesian navigators used the rising and setting points of the sun and moon, along with stellar positions, to determine direction. During both day and night, adjusting their course as celestial bodies shifted. You imagine the navigator watching the golden sun dip below the horizon, noting its position against familiar landmarks or star patterns, anchoring the canoe's bearing amid endless waves. Here's your quirky tidbit. Navigators also used horizon boards, flat pieces of wood marked with star positions, to teach apprentices the exact rising and setting points of key stars, a tangible aid in their mental celestial compass. Historians still argue the extent to which these physical tools were used versus purely oral tradition and observation. Some suggest horizon boards were widespread teaching devices. Others believe they were rare or symbolic. You feel the complexity and adaptability of this system, how navigators combined multiple celestial cues to stay true even when weather or sea conditions obscured one method. Here's where you grasp the sophistication of this ancient science. An intuitive, multi-layered approach to navigation that rivals modern techniques despite lacking instruments. You envision the navigator at the bow, calm and focused eyes flicking between stars, sun, moon, and horizon, weaving all signals into a coherent path across the vast Pacific. Next, you'll delve into the renowned Polynesian star compass's mental charts that held the secrets to traversing the ocean's expanse. You settle into the rhythm of the night sky, imagining the intricate star compasses etched into the navigator's memory, celestial maps divided into dozens of segments, each pointing toward islands and guiding the voyage. Here's your mainstream historical fact. Polynesian star compasses divided the horizon into 32 to 36 houses or sectors, each associated with specific stars rising and setting, allowing navigators to maintain course by tracking stellar movements. You picture an apprentice learning to read this invisible compass, memorizing star paths, their angles, and how they shift with seasons, a mental map as complex as any paper chart. Here's your quirky tidbit. Some star compasses were arranged vertically, reflecting the rising and setting paths of stars at different latitudes, helping navigators adjust when traveling north or south across the Pacific. Historians still argue whether all Polynesian navigators used the same compass systems or if variations existed among island groups reflecting local sky patterns and traditions. The answer likely involves a rich diversity of techniques. You feel the navigator's awe at the stars, each a fixed point in a moving sea, a guide shining through the vast darkness, connecting the heavens and the ocean. Here's where you appreciate the extraordinary mental feat holding an entire star compass in your head, matching it to shifting skies, and steering a fragile canoe across thousands of miles of open water. You imagine the thrill when the first star of a new house appears, confirming the path is true, a cosmic checkpoint in the vast ocean journey. Next, you'll explore how navigators faced storms, night travels, and the many perils of open sea voyaging without modern instruments. The sky darkens further, and you feel the vast, unpredictable ocean's pulse beneath the canoe. Navigators faced countless challenges, storms that tossed their vessels nights without stars, and the constant threat of losing direction in the endless blue. Here's your mainstream historical fact. Polynesian navigators developed strategies for dealing with adverse weather using knowledge of wind patterns, cloud formations, and ocean swell directions to maintain course even when stars were obscured. You imagine a sudden storm rolling in the sky, black and roiling the waves, rising like mountains. The navigator's calm voice cuts through the chaos, calling for steady hands and sharp senses as the crew battles nature's fury. Here's your quirky tidbit. Some navigators memorized the behavior of clouds reflecting islands even before the land was visible. The shapes and colors of clouds could signal proximity to shore. Historians still argue the extent to which night voyaging without stars was common or rare. Some believe Polynesians avoided such journeys unless necessary, while others argue their skill allowed them to travel confidently under moonlight and cloud cover. You feel the resilience required navigators trusted not just the stars, but their intuition and accumulated wisdom, balancing risk and reward in voyages that could last weeks or months. Here's where you appreciate the human spirit's tenacity, braving uncertainty with tools forged from deep understanding and respect for nature's power. You envision the crew working in silence, the navigators' steady guidance, weaving a path through darkness, and storm their bond, a lifeline, against the vast ocean's indifference. Next, you'll trace the incredible migrations and settlements made possible by these ancient navigation skills shaping the Pacific's cultural landscape. You stand on the shore of a newly discovered island, the culmination of a journey that began with stars and ocean swells. Polynesian navigators didn't just cross vast distances, they settled and shaped remote lands, creating vibrant cultures across the Pacific. Here's your mainstream historical fact. Polynesian migrations, guided by expert navigation, led to the settlement of islands as far apart as Hawaii, Easter Island, Rapa Nui, and New Zealand, spanning thousands of miles across the ocean. You imagine the first footsteps on unfamiliar shores, the excitement and uncertainty of carving out new homes amid unfamiliar landscapes, all thanks to the knowledge passed down through generations. Here's your quirky tidbit. Some navigators used wayfinding chants, oral traditions blending star lore, ocean knowledge, and history, helping crews remember complex routes and the stories tied to each island. Historians still argue how deliberate these voyages were, whether accidental drift or purposeful exploration. Increasing archaeological and linguistic evidence supports intentional planned migrations driven by navigation mastery. You feel the incredible courage and vision it took to sail into the unknown, trusting in the stars and the ocean to guide you to new horizons. Here's where you appreciate the lasting impact. These migrations not only spread people, but also languages, customs, and technologies, weaving the vast Polynesian cultural tapestry. You watch as descendants celebrate ancient navigation at festivals, honoring their ancestors' skill and bravery. Next, you'll explore how European contact disrupted these traditions and how Polynesian navigation survived through change. You feel the weight of history as European explorers cross paths with Polynesian navigators, bringing new technologies and new threats to these ancient ocean travelers. The delicate art of star navigation faced profound challenges. Here's your mainstream historical fact. When Europeans arrived in the Pacific in the 18th century, they brought compasses, sextants, and ships that altered traditional voyaging practices and disrupted indigenous navigation knowledge. You imagine the confusion and adaptation as Polynesian navigators encountered these foreign tools, some embracing the new, others holding fast to ancestral methods passed down through centuries. Here's your quirky tidbit. Captain James Cook famously relied on Polynesian guides during his voyages, acknowledging their unparalleled knowledge of the seas. Yet, European colonization gradually eroded indigenous navigational traditions. Historians still argue the extent to which European contact led to the decline of traditional navigation versus the resilience and revival of these skills among island communities. Some see loss, others persistence and adaptation. You sense the tension between change and continuity as colonialism reshaped Pacific societies, but couldn't fully extinguish the star-based knowledge that had guided explorers for millennia. Here's where you realize that navigation was not just a tool for travel, but a core part of cultural identity. One that survived hidden or transformed beneath waves of history. Next, you'll witness how modern Polynesians have revived and celebrated their navigation heritage, rekindling ancient skills in contemporary times. You stand amidst the vibrant resurgence of Polynesian navigation, a revival of ancient wisdom, breathing life back into star-guided voyages. Modern navigators, like their ancestors, set sail not just for travel, but to reclaim identity and heritage. Here's your mainstream historical fact. Since the late 20th century, Polynesian communities have revived traditional navigation techniques with voyages like the Hokulea, demonstrating open ocean sailing guided solely by stars, swells, and natural cues. You feel the rhythmic pulse of drums and chants as crews gather, studying star maps and practicing wave reading, reconnecting with ancestral knowledge once threatened by colonialism and modernization. Here's your quirky tidbit. Some modern navigators blend ancient methods with modern safety equipment, radio, and GPS, creating a hybrid approach that honors tradition while embracing contemporary tools. Historians still argue about the accuracy of reconstructed navigation techniques. Some enthusiasts claim near-perfect replication, while skeptics question whether oral traditions can fully restore lost knowledge. You sense the deep pride fueling this revival, as islands once isolated by history are linked anew through shared voyages and cultural exchange. Here's where you appreciate how navigation is more than technique. It's a living tradition, a bridge between past and present, sea and sky, people and place. You watch as young apprentices take the helm, their eyes fixed on the stars, carrying forward the legacy written in light and water. Next, you'll dive into the ongoing mysteries and scholarly debates surrounding Polynesian navigation's origins and methods. You drift into the swirling currents of debate among scholars fascinated by Polynesian navigation questions about how such vast, precise voyages were possible without modern tools and what that tells us about human ingenuity. Here's your mainstream historical fact. Anthropologists and historians have long studied Polynesian navigation, combining oral histories, ethnography, and experimental voyages to piece together its secrets. You imagine heated discussions around academic tables, arguments about whether ancient Polynesians used systematic star compasses, or if their navigation relied more on intuition and trial and error. Here's your quirky tidbit. Some researchers suggest Polynesians may have also used ocean reflections and bioluminescence as subtle guides, turning the night sea itself into a luminous map. Historians still argue about the scale and intentionality of early Polynesian voyages. Were they accidental drifts or deliberate, expertly planned expeditions? Recent evidence favors the latter, but mysteries remain. You feel the excitement of discovery, the thrill of uncovering a culture's complex relationship with nature and technology, challenging Western assumptions about ancient navigation. Here's where you grasp the bigger picture. Polynesian navigation is a testament to human adaptability and the power of oral tradition. Memory and observation skills as vital as any instrument. You visualize researchers sailing alongside traditional navigators, blending science and tradition to honor a heritage written in stars and waves. Next, you'll conclude your journey with reflections on the lasting legacy of this extraordinary oceanic knowledge. The ocean stretches endlessly before you as you come to the final chapter of this journey, a reflection on the enduring legacy of Polynesian navigation and its profound impact on culture, science, and human spirit. Here's your mainstream historical fact. Polynesian navigation is recognized today as one of humanity's greatest maritime achievements, celebrated for its sophistication and the deep connection between people and environment it embodies. You breathe in the salty air, feeling the rhythm of waves and stars that have guided countless voyages across millennia, linking islands and peoples in a web of exploration and discovery. Here's your quirky tidbit. In 2017, UNESCO inscribed the wayfinding tradition on its intangible cultural heritage list, recognizing the navigational knowledge and skills of the Polynesian voyaging communities as a priceless treasure of human creativity. Historians still argue how much Polynesian navigation influenced other maritime cultures and how knowledge spread across the Pacific. But one truth is clear: this legacy continues to inspire and teach. Here's where you feel the profound beauty that this ancient knowledge passed down through stories, stars, and waves remains alive today, reminding us of the power of observation, memory, and courage. You close your eyes, imagining a canoe gliding silently under a sky thick with stars, guided by the steady hand and unwavering gaze of a navigator whose ancestors looked up at the same constellations thousands of years ago. And as you drift into sleep, remember that every journey, no matter how vast or daunting, begins with a single steady step, guided by the light above. Sweet dreams.